Ever feel like trying to predict the future is like, well, a fool's errand?
It can definitely feel that way.
So you're constantly playing catch up. And lately, it seems even harder to keep up, you know?
Absolutely.
Which is why today's deep dive is all about why predicting the future is becoming almost impossible.
Right.
But more importantly, how we can still prepare even when it feels like the ground is constantly shifting beneath us. And a big thanks to you for sending over that article from the World Economic Forum.
Oh, of course.
Really got the wheels turning on this one.
Yeah, it's a thought-provoking piece. It argues that, relying solely on predictions, especially ones based on past trends, it's like driving using only your rearview mirror.
You're going to crash.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're setting yourself up for a bumpy ride.
So true. It's like, how many times have we seen these super confident economic forecasts, the ones that are like, this is definitely what's going to happen, and then they totally miss the mark.
Right.
Like, it seems like every other week some expert is left scratching their head about the latest inflation numbers or, the crazy ups and downs of the market. It's like, didn't you see this coming?
And, the article highlights this increasing frequency of unexpected events, like they actually call them meta-eruptions.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, they're these multidimensional disruptions that kind of ripple outwards in ways you can never predict. Like, think back to the beginning of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
The initial lockdowns, it wasn't just a health crisis. It set off this chain reaction.
Mm.
Supply chains went haywire. Economies were sent into a tailspin. Even, like, the way we work and socialize was totally upended.
Mm.
I mean, none of us could have predicted all of that.
Okay, meta-eruptions. I'm going to have to add that to my
It's
vocabulary.
like a mouthful there, right?
But they sound pretty intense, I'm not going to lie. But even with all those curveballs, I'm guessing some people are still better at making sense of the future than others. Like, what about those super forecasters I've heard about, Are they just out of a job now?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And you're right. Some people are really good at predicting certain types of outcomes. Like, think about those who nailed the election results.
Right.
Or even, there's this thing called the Good Judgment Project. And they've had amazing success predicting things like if North Korea would launch a missile, stuff like that.
Wow. So those super forecasters, they're the real deal, huh?
They're incredibly skilled,
Wow.
but even they have their limits, right? Like, they mostly operate within a certain type of uncertainty, one where you have data to work with and at least some idea of what the potential outcomes might be.
Okay, that makes sense.
Where things get really interesting and where even super forecasters struggle is in dealing with deep uncertainty.
Deep uncertainty. That has a nice ring to it. So what makes it different from just like regular old uncertainty? We've all experienced that, right?
Think of it this way. Risk is when you know the potential outcomes and their probabilities, like flipping a coin heads or tails. 50-50.
Easy peasy.
Uncertainty is when you know the potential outcomes, but you don't know the exact odds.
Okay.
Like launching a new product in a crowded market. You could succeed or fail, but who knows what the percentage is?
Right.
Deep uncertainty is when you don't even know the possible outcomes, let alone how likely they are. It's like, try predicting what the internet will look like in 20 years.
Good luck with that.
It's a total crap.
It's like a blank slate, right? So with all this talk of meta-eruptions and deep uncertainty, it sounds like our old ways of predicting the future, they might need a bit of an upgrade, don't they?
Yeah, they might be a little outdated.
And that's where this whole foresight thing comes in, right? But how is foresight more than just, a buzzword we toss around? What makes it a better way to navigate a future that seems like, increasingly impossible to predict?
It's a whole different way of thinking, really. Yeah. See, foresight, it acknowledges that the future isn't like this fixed destination. It's more like a constantly evolving landscape that we can actually influence and shape.
Okay, I like that. So instead of stressing about finding that one perfect prediction, it's about exploring multiple potential paths, right?
Exactly.
And getting comfortable with, hey, what if this happens or what if that happens? That actually takes a lot of pressure off when I think about it.
Totally. And you know what? This aligns perfectly with what you mentioned earlier about efficient learning.
Mm-hmm.
Foresight, it actually gives you a framework to navigate complexity.
Right.
Without drowning in, information overload.
Okay, I'm all for anything that makes dealing with the future less overwhelming, that's for sure. But how do we actually do foresight? It still feels a bit abstract. How do we move from imagining all these different futures to making smarter decisions in the here and now?
One of the most powerful tools within foresight is scenario planning.
Mm.
So imagine you're leading a team and you're trying to decide whether to invest in a new product.
Okay, I'm with you.
So instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, betting everything on one most likely scenario, You use scenario planning to consider a whole range of possibilities.
So it's less about going all in on one prediction and more about hedging our bets, so to speak, thinking through different contingencies just in case.
Exactly. You might explore, let's say, a future where the economy is booming and everyone wants your product demand goes through the roof.
Sounds good to me.
Right. But then you also need to look at another scenario where, maybe growth is just kind of stagnant. And of course, you've got to consider the what if there's a recession scenario.
Oh, right. Got to cover all those bases.
And the key is you analyze how that product, the one you're considering investing in, would actually perform in each of these scenarios.
Makes sense.
And then you use all of that to make a smarter decision about your strategy today.
So even if we can't predict the future with like 100% certainty, we can at least try to strategize for different possibilities, right? And make decisions that are more adaptable, more flexible, less about always being right and more about being resilient.
You hit the nail on the head. And here's the best part. This isn't just some fancy tool for, big corporations making million-dollar decisions. You can actually use these same principles in your own life.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. Give me some real-world examples. How could someone use this scenario planning thing for their career, for instance?
Sure. Let's say you're thinking about making a career change, right? So instead of just, looking at what's hot right this second, what if you brainstormed different scenarios for the industries you're interested in?
Like, imagine different ways things could play out.
Exactly. So you might ask yourself, what if automation really takes off in this field? Or what if suddenly there's a huge surge in demand for a specific skill set because of, I don't know, some crazy global event?
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
By mapping out those different possibilities, you can start to identify, okay, what are the skills that would be valuable no matter what happens?
So you're more adaptable, more future-proof, no matter what curveballs the world throws your way?
Exactly. It's like packing a career toolkit with a really diverse set of skills so that you're ready for anything. Less about trying to pick the so-called winning path and more about being prepared to pivot, to adapt, whatever comes your way.
I like it. So instead of putting all our eggs in one basket, we're building a more resilient basket.
I like that, yeah. And this goes beyond just careers too, right? Imagine you're trying to decide whether to buy a house. Big decision. So instead of freaking out over one single forecast for the housing market, will prices go up or down? What if you consider different possibilities?
Right, because no one actually knows for sure.
Exactly. So you might think, okay, what if interest rates go up? What if the economy takes a nosedive? By taking the time to really weigh those different options, you can make a much more informed decision.
That's so smart. And it's less about trying to predict the future and more about understanding your own risk tolerance.
You got it.
This is totally changing how I think about planning. It's not about trying to outsmart the future. It's about embracing the unknown and being prepared to roll with the punches. And this ties back to what you were saying earlier about foresight, acknowledging that the future isn't predetermined. We actually have agency. We're not just along for the ride.
Absolutely. And the article actually makes the point that imagining and preparing for different futures, it can actually influence which path we end up on.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you believe in a particular future and you start acting accordingly, you're more likely to make it happen.
Precisely. And imagine, on a larger scale, if more people, organizations, if they all started thinking this way, engaging in this kind of what-if thinking together.
That's powerful.
The collective foresight could actually be a force for shaping the future we want to see.
This is what I call empowering. So how do we actually make foresight a more active part of our thinking? Where do we even begin?
The good news is it doesn't require some special skill set or anything. It really starts with just shifting our mindset, and asking the right questions.
Yeah.
So instead of getting hung up on trying to find that one right answer about the future, because let's face it, there probably isn't one, we need to get comfortable with what-if thinking.
I'm starting to see how this connects to the bigger picture here. We're constantly bombarded with information, predictions, expert opinions. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed, kind of powerless. But foresight, it's like flipping the script. It empowers us to actually take control, to shape our own narratives for the future.
It really is about taking back that control,
Yeah.
And remembering that we're not just passengers on this journey. And the article really drives that point home. There's this great line, the future of prediction is imagination.
That's so good. It's not about some fancy algorithm or just crunching a bunch of data. It's about tapping into our own creativity, that ability we all have to think in new and innovative ways. So if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but where do I even start? What's one thing they could do like today to bring a little more of that foresight mindset into their life?
It can be surprisingly simple.
Hmm.
Think about one area of your life. Maybe it's your career, maybe it's your finances, could even be a personal relationship, whatever. Think about an area where you've been kind of operating on autopilot, just assuming things will continue on the same path they're already on.
We all do that, right?
Oh, yeah. So instead of assuming, what if you just ask yourself one simple question? What if my assumptions about this are wrong?
Ooh, that's a good one. What if? It seems so simple, but it can really open up a whole new world of possibilities.
Right. It challenges us to step outside of those comfortable little boxes we build for ourselves.
Totally.
And, that one question, that what if, it could be the spark that ignites some really creative thinking. It could lead you to a future you hadn't even considered before.
This whole deep dive, this conversation, it's been a fantastic reminder that we live in a world that's overflowing with uncertainty. But the best thing we can do is not try to fight it, but to embrace it. It's less about trying to erase the unknown and more about, like you were saying, getting comfortable navigating it, even using it as fuel for creativity, for resilience.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The future belongs to those who are curious, to those who are adaptable, those who aren't afraid to ask, what if?
Love it. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder those what ifs and start crafting your own vision for the future. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.